Good evening. We're going to talk about Subarus, or rather, this is another live questions and answer session. So if you've got any questions Subaru related, then fire them at me. I have nothing pre-scripted to say apart from, a couple of tiny announcements, but today it's all about you. It's answering your questions, anything you want to ask, be it modifications, tuning, what works, what doesn't work, fault finding, check engine lights, what's causing them, how to get more power, how to get less power. Some people are weird, but how to do anything basically. I've been tuning Subarus for 20 years now. I've come across most things. Although having said that, in the UK we don't have the VB version of the WRX, so no experience directly on that. So if you want to ask a technical question on a VB, then probably not the person to ask, I'm afraid. But anything else, ask away, and I will do my very best to answer. As you know, if you've been here before, great, welcome back. If you haven't, if you have a question, it really helps me to pick it out of the live stream chat that I've got sort of showing on the screen on the side here. If you put a big Q at the beginning of it just to say this a question, I don't have helpers helping me with this that can pick out the questions and give me pre-scripted answers. So, there might be some umming and ahhing, but I will do my very best to actually give you a honest and truthful answer, or tell you if I don't know. So, there we are. I can see we've got a few of the regulars here. And good evening, Mel. Good evening, Manuel. Good evening, Jack. Neil, Pat, Paul, Colin. Yeah, lots of people. Right, so we're getting a few questions. Before I start on this, it's really weird how this is spread across the world. So if you're watching and you haven't got a question, by all means, just type in where you're from, because it blows my mind that there's people right the way across the world that watch this, hoping to learn something. Every day's a school day, and I learn something pretty much every day. So it's good. So yeah, say where you're from. Yeah, chilly Glasgow for Neil. So say where you're from, say what you're driving. There's lots of Subarus right the way across the world. It is an absolute enthusiast car, and long may it continue, because these cars nowadays are boring as bleep. Subarus aren't, they have their quirks, they have their frustrations, they have their issues. You'd have seen in some of the videos that I've done, common problems, common faults, issues, how to solve them. And I'll be doing lots more of those videos now. Now that I've got a proper setup and hopefully some dedicated time each week to doing videos, then there should be lots more coming. There is a video that's gone live this evening for supporters and academy members, which will be going public on Saturday morning, which is an update on the Tommy Kyra M20B restoration project. It's almost finished, so this is just a little sneak preview of what's to come. There'll be a much more detailed, including a driving of it and what it's like to drive a piece of history. So enough of me talking. I'll get on to your questions. Right. Right, okay, so I'll start with Neil, because Neil's always here. Thank you very much for tuning in every week, Neil. Right, so you got your classic running again after the overheat. Did a RCM water pump, alloy housing, 71 degree stat. It used to run at 81 degrees before overheat, now runs at 77. Is that too cold now? That's fine. That's the whole idea of the colder thermostat. So it opens the thermostat at 71 degrees. Water's going around the radiator. And if you're driving along or the fans are going, then it's really going to cool it down a lot. 77 is fine. If you're getting lower than 70, then you start getting cooling temperature compensations going in there, like adding extra fuel, which wouldn't be good, but 77 is absolutely fine. It's not like some of the modern engines that need to run at sort of 95 degrees before they're efficient. It's a Subaru. It's a 30-year-old design, or 33-year-old design. I think the Impreza was 33 years old a few weeks ago. Right. Question: have you come across the engine tuner driver display for the Link ECU? Is it any good? No, I haven't, so I don't know, and I wouldn't really want to pass judgment on one of their products, I'm afraid. I have a much nicer piece of equipment, which is a Cyvex piece of kit, which is a Bluetooth IMU, which will plug into any aftermarket ECU, Link included, display it on a beautiful app on Apple or Android, plus give G readings. There's a slightly more advanced version that has 100 hertz GPS for speedos, those sort of things. So it will display on your phone or tablet or a Android head unit. You can have a full dial set up there rather than a separate digital display. Ooh, right, Elliot. Looking to buy Hawkeye Spec C JDM next year. What would you recommend doing to it with a 10k budget? Want to keep it reliable. Personally, I think they're an absolutely amazing car, almost standard. If it was me with one of those, I certainly wouldn't be changing the turbo. I wouldn't be changing anything too dramatic, apart from maybe giving it a freer flowing exhaust, a remap, and doing some minor handling mods, like just maybe uprating the rear anti-roll bar, getting the wheel alignment done properly and precisely, which a lot of tyre or alignment places won't do. They'll just kind of set it in the green band and it's good enough for them. But if you get it done precisely and exactly, it transforms the car. If you're just going to be using it on the road, I would just, 10,000 budget is a lot to make that a really great car, because it's a really great car to start with. Right. Okay, hi, Britannic 2000. Still going over best solution for the GF8 version 4 wagon with Blitz exhaust to make it road legal. Hale and Scott to a sports car. Would this be the best solution? Whether it's the best or not is all subjective. But I think it's a very good solution to make it road legal. The sports cats are expensive, but they are much freer flowing than a standard cat. But you do need to get them warm to go through the MOT test or the emissions tests in pretty much every country. UK is no different to anyone else. You need to get the cats glowing before it'll go through on the CO and the hydrocarbons. Right. How to diagnose ringland failure. I did burn some oil and turbo is good. Did a compression test and all went to 120 psi. Plus cylinder 4 leaked off the fastest. That's the one I suspect. It's difficult because sometimes with the ringlands, they can still be in place, so a compression test isn't really going to show anything. The way I can generally tell, but it doesn't always work, is if you're getting random sort of knock corrections at about 3000 RPM, sort of partial load, then it can sometimes point in that direction. So, but it's not precise, and if the ringland piece is still intact but loose, the compression is not going to be altered. The leak down test is not really going to show anything. And you kind of have to wait for it to get pretty bad before you can say for definite that it is a particular cylinder. What you could do is get a bore scope down there and just see whether there's any scoring on the bore, which might indicate that there is. But check with the other bores to make sure that, you know, that there is a difference between the two. But if you're suspecting something, then I would probably say your suspicions are more than likely correct, particularly if it's a 2.5, because the pistons on those are known to be a lot more fragile. Mr. Bad Intent. Good name. South Africa, drive a 2009 WRX. Code is you have a couple of intake changes done. You have the T-Rex patch mode with launch control and flat foot shifting. Yeah, the CH mod Tiny Rex patches work pretty well to give you the flat foot shifting and the launch control. They're pretty basic, but they're pretty trouble free as far as just giving you launch control and flat shifting, which is a bit of a giggle. It's a bit weird to start with, but it's an interesting modification and an interesting addition to the standard ROM. Right, Pat. Hi, Pat. What would be better for my EJ205, a hybrid TDF4 or a VF35? Want to run a little over 300 horsepower. Yeah, interesting one this, because I'm doing a video which will be out next week, basically talking about the TDF4 hybrids. Normally, or previously, I would say VF35 because, you know, they're proven. They work the standard, you know, they pretty much all do the same thing. It's just the base engine or the base car that they're on means that the power varies between sort of 320 and 350. Obviously on yours, you could turn it down a bit to like 300 or just hit the 300. But the VF35s are getting quite old now. So a lot of the time it's, you know, you'd have seen advertised, you know, VF35, it's only done, you know, it came off a car with 40,000 miles on it, crash damage, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't mean that it was necessarily the first car or the only car like that turbo's been on. So it's a bit weird, and some are getting a bit ropey now. So the TD04 hybrids that are available now with a nice new highly developed wheels in there, you know, they can flow easily over 300 horsepower, 320, 350. You know, I've had 383 out of a TD04, and I've got a TD04 on its way to me very shortly, which I'm told will do 400 horsepower. I'm looking for a good example car to test it on, so I might put a call out soon for volunteers. But 300 horsepower, either one of those, depends what you can get that's in good condition and cheap enough. Basically, both of those will do 300 very easily. Right, can't seem to find ECU edit definitions for my ID, and in ECU Flash and ROM Radar I don't have the definitions like ECU Edit to add a burble tune or pops and bangs, you would say. Is there a way to do it? Right. If you've got the definitions in ROM Radar or ECU Flash, then there's a function in ECU Edit where you can import those into ECU Edit, either as a single file or import the whole folder as separate files, so that they're smaller files, and you can add the extra bits to add the overrun fueling, the pops and bangs, those sort of things. The XML is available if you sign up in the Academy as an Academy member, not as a supporter, but as an Academy member. You get access to the Discord group and all the ECU Edit XML definitions that I use, with the pops and bangs and the silly stuff and the toys in there. They're all available in there for download. So, if you wanted to do that just for 1 month, just to download those, then that's fine by me. But there are all these things available in the ECU. It's just that someone hasn't already disclosed them. And for your ECU, which is the 2009 WRX, all of those bits will be in there on a 400W ECU. Yeah, I would have thought they're all available, certainly to make your pops and bangs. Right, okay, will you need to get the map checked again as the crank was one tooth out? Does it feel different? Does it behave different now to when it was mapped? Was it mapped with the one tooth out, or was it mapped theoretically perfect and the belt change was done in the meantime? If the belt change was done in the meantime, then I would say it doesn't need mapping again. But there's never any harm in checking it. Make sure that the air fuel ratio is right, and make sure it's debt free. So either you do that yourself, make a set of deck cans, put a wideband on there, and see what it's doing, or you take it to a tuner. Right, Slow Life 492 on a 04 Forester XT, upgraded to a VF, catless up pipe, all supported mods. The only thing I haven't upgraded to is the STI intercooler. How much am I missing out on by not upgrading? Right, you're probably missing out on about 20 horsepower. The 04 XT intercooler is okay, it's pretty good, but if you're on boost for a longer period of time, or you're going all the way up through the gears, then the standard intercooler can't get rid of the heat quick enough. So an STI intercooler, or the hatchback one, or a bigger one, or a front mount even, will be able to get rid of that heat so much more, so that your tuner could run more ignition timing, which is where you're going to get the power from, or certainly give the tune closer to the optimum, rather than having to build in a lot of safety margin because of the fact you're on the top mount or the standard top mount. You're probably 20 horsepower down on a standardish VF, like a 35. On the bigger ones, like a 34 or like a VF 400, you may be sort of 40 horsepower down. Thoughts on the new STI Link in Tokyo? Another hatchback with 6-speed manual DCC-D option, FA24. I don't think they need to go for 400 horsepower stock. You know, personally, I think 350 is a brilliant level for a Subaru. I'm not keen on the hatchback design. It looks too Corolla or Yaris GR, but you know, I'm sure they've tested it with focus groups, and you know it will do quite well as competition for those cars. But I don't think they need to do 400 horsepower because it would probably take it too close to a safety margin, or too small a safety margin to actually mean that it's reliable for them. By all means, make it so that certain bits can be upgraded and, you know, beyond the warranty. But I think, you know, 400, they don't need to do that. Right, very interested to know how you will go about minimising the Valley of Death with an EJ206 208 engine. Right, Valley of Death, for those that don't know the joys of twin turbo legacy life, it's the big dip in the power between the primary and the secondary turbo. It's a nightmare, it's horrible to drive with. Twin turbo legacy drivers either kid themselves thinking that it's a quirk and nice and great and all the rest of it, but personally I find it scary as hell because it's happening just as you're overtaking and the power goes. You know, if you saw a power graph for when it goes up and then down and then up, it's horrific. There is no way to get rid of it, right? Just full stop. There is no way to get rid of it. I had a customer a few years ago now. He was an engineer. He knew best, and he was going to reverse the mechanism and do this, that, and the other. We tried so many, or he tried so many different things, and then paid me to tune it each time. And in the end, I told him to stop bothering because, you know, I was happy to take his money, but there was not making any difference whatsoever. The Valley of Death is there because of the mechanical setup of it, like the massive box of you know, the box of solenoids and all the rest of it, the big pipe work, the crossover pipe. The way to get rid of it is fit a single turbo, if I'm brutally honest, and that's what I'll be doing on my Blitzen twin turbo. You know, it's not going to have a twin turbo on it; it's going to have a single. Because a good single turbo will outperform it all the way across the power band. But if you wanted to keep with the twin turbo, yeah, you just need to get as much space as you can out of the primary. You will always have a Valley of Death though. It's just the way it is. And the more you tune the secondary, the more you'll feel the Valley of Death. Right, sorry if that upsets some twin turbo legacy people, but they are weird to drive, really weird to drive. You know, Subaru test things on the legacy. You know, they tested the suspension setup for the hatchback on the legacy first. If it worked, they put it on the Imprezas. They test everything on the legacy. If it works, they put it on the Imprezas. The key point I'm trying to make here is there were never twin turbo Imprezas, so therefore it didn't work. Hi Rick, tiny rattle on cold startup. Sounds like the emissions air pump, but I thought that had been taken out of the loop. The codes for it had been switched off. If you just unplug it, that'd be a good way of working out whether it is that or not, or whether it's a heat shield or an idler or something more sinister. But if you just unplug it, it won't bring up any codes because I've switched them off on your ECU already. So that's a good way to check whether it is that. Done. Right. Right, Jack. Right, Jack. Spec C hatch. Believe it was set up in UK fuel by myself at the beginning of the year. Currently can only manage to get 10 miles per gallon. No fuel smells, black smoke, standard. I would say there is something very amiss. It will either be an air leak, like after the turbo, so intercooler pipe or dump valve. If you've got an aftermarket dump valve, if that's leaking, then that would make it absolutely drink fuel, but you might not necessarily smell the extra fuel, because, you know, Subarus always smell of fuel anyway. I have loads of people that bring the cars to me and say, oh, it's running really rich, but I'll put it on the dyno and it isn't. It's quite probably the opposite. It's running quite lean. I would check for leaks in the pipework, particularly after the turbo, so intercooler pipework or dump valve. Do you have contact for anyone that hybrid your TDF4 in the UK or even better in Ireland? I don't know anyone in Ireland, but I always trust Fastline turbos for the TDF4 hybrids or the VFs or the 3076s, those sort of things. You know, they're good, UK based, centre of the UK, and they'll ship out to Ireland, no problem. Okay, so you think it was mapped 1 tooth out, does feel out. Do have a wideband and KS knock sensor. Lambda seems better and less knock, but sounds different on the exhaust note. I'm not a fan of the KS3 knock meter personally. No, I much prefer my analog deck cans. If you can make a set of those, Neil, and get them on there just to check whether it is actually detting, because the KS3, depending on what the gain levels you've set up in there are, might not actually show or tell you whether it's detting. I'd certainly want to check it with proper deck cans rather than the KS3. I've had a KS3, but I don't find them reliable enough for tuning a Subaru, in my opinion. Hi Sam. Thinking about fabricating your own headers in Inconel, expensive for a TurboSmart fresh air anti-lag valve with pressure accumulator. What are your experiences with such a setup, if you have any? I haven't. I have to be honest. I haven't tried it, so I couldn't say whether it's amazing or not, or very expensive and not worth the money, or I don't know. So I'm not sure anyone aside from maybe Gobstopper 3 has sort of incorporated that system in the UK yet. Right, another question, Neil. Right, front crank pulley, is it better to have the original damped item as I have fitted a billet pairing item? Yeah, there's a lot of people debate this and whether the damped one's better and all the rest of it. Personally, I've fitted lightweight crank pulley on mine. didn't see any downside. That was on the race car, so the idle was much higher than a normal road car. The only thing you'd find with fitting a lighter one, along with a lightweight flywheel, is more inclined to stall. There are people that say that you need the damp in there for this, that, and the other. Yeah, I reserve judgment on that. I'm not going to say they're talking rubbish, but I haven't seen any downside from fitting a lighter one. Right, hi Kyle. Car from time to time stutters and loses power. Well, I'm guessing it's not up to temp. Yeah. What's the baseline oil temperature before I can get in and go? Happens when cold. I can't remember whether we got oil temperature fed into the ECU on yours, but generally speaking, the ECU will be in a warm up or semi-limp mode until the coolant temperature is above 50. If you've got oil temperature fed into the ECU on yours, which as I say I can't remember, it will be a similar sort of thing. It will start releasing power and revs and boost beyond sort of 50 degrees oil temperature. Village idiots. When you have learned fuel or timing, is the car currently running off these maps? Not sure I totally understand what you mean, but learned fuel corrections, that's generally within closed loop. So when the car's idling or off boost or below 4,300, depending on the particular ROM ID that you've got, if it's off boost or within that closed loop range, then it will make corrections based on what the lambda sensor is telling it. So if it's needing to add fuel, it will add fuel. If it needs to take fuel away to get to 14.7 AFR, then it will do that. If it's learning that within a certain range of the MAF curve, like the bit just before it goes into open loop, i.e. it's not getting a feedback, it will remember the learned corrections for the fueling and carry and apply those all the way up beyond that. So it will go up right the way up on boost. So if it's adding fuel, it's going to make it slightly richer on boost. If it's taking fuel away, it's making it leaner. Whether it's safe and leaner is debatable. Depends on what your mapper has set it to. But if it's learning in that last bit, chances are when it was mapped, it didn't have the learning, or it wasn't learning for long enough to actually apply those changes. So generally speaking, it's not a good idea to have too much learning going along, because it will mess with the map, mess with the tune. Ignition timing is basically taken away from the base and the knot correction. So there's two ignition timing tables. Depending on what the advanced multiplier is, it will either apply 100% of the advanced table on top of the base timing, or it will be a proportion of it. So if the advanced multiplier is 1, it'll apply 100% on a 32-bit ECU. This is. If the advanced multiplier is 16 on a 16-bit ECU, then it will apply 100% of the advance on top of the base. If the advanced multiplier drops down, or the DAM, if you want to sort of use COG terminology, if it drops down to 8, let's say on a 16-bit ECU, it will add half of the knot correction table to the base. So it will run that. It will also take out ignition timing if it hears that, or if it thinks it hears that. And if it hears it often enough in a particular region, it will learn the knot correction. But I really wouldn't want to ever rely on that to keep the tune safe, because I've seen many times where I've heard that and the ECU hasn't seen a thing. So do not ever tune Subarus without deck cans, despite what you might see with some tuners. Right, hopefully I answered that question. How are we doing for time? Right, loads. Right. Is there a way to increase these temps fairly quickly? It can take around 20 to 30 minutes to be able to use. I'm not sure what to say to that, Carl, apart from drive harder, but you wouldn't want to drive harder to warm it up. Maybe check to see whether the values are correct. What the sensor's showing is what the reality is, because a lot of the time we rely on the calibration setups that are provided for sensors, and they might not always be correct. So possibly it could be that the sensor calibration is out. JRD29, do you know what would be best to use as the fault code reader for an 05 WRX? There are a gazillion Bluetooth OBD readers on Amazon, ranging from £10 to £80. Pretty much all of them will sort of interact with pretty much free software like Talk Pro, and we'll be able to read codes and reset the ECU. So as a Subaru owner, I'd recommend that anyone has one of those, because the feeling in your stomach as a check engine light pops up is quite hard to ignore, and it's a worrying thing. And if it isn't a worrying thing, that's probably even more worrying, because you might think you know what the code is or what it's relating to, but there might be more than one problem. So you might ignore it because it's popped up before and it was nothing, but it might be something more serious this time. So any of the Bluetooth OBD readers on Amazon will work. There are some separate ones with a display, and they range a little bit more money wise, but yeah, they all work. They don't all necessarily give you the right description of the fault, but if you get the P0 number or whatever the number is for the check engine code, and search on the Subaru forums, you'll be able to find the actual fault and what are the likely issues. There's even equipment like snap-on equipment. If you plug it into a Subaru and it comes up with, I think it's 0545, the snap-on equipment will say it's a brake booster. There isn't a brake booster on the Subaru. It's actually an alternator charging issue. But you wouldn't know that unless you searched for the code. Yeah, there are loads of them. Talk Pro is a good piece of kit. Doesn't always work with some of the more obscure JDM Subarus, but certainly all the UK and USDM sort of models, it will query the ECU and it will show the fault codes. Can you tell Woody next time? I think actually, Carl, that Woody's has got more power than yours, but Maxwell, right, I've got one on, too bad it won't work. How can you message me? Email or WhatsApp. If you Google Race Dynamics telephone number, you can message me or ring me. I'm not very good at answering the phone because if I'm working on a customer's car or on the dyno or mapping, I will not answer the car. The most important thing that I'm doing is mapping the car, so I will not interrupt that for anyone, not even my wife. Yeah, message is probably the best. Facebook message, WhatsApp, Facebook page message, email, duncan@racedynamics.com. And when I get a chance, I get back to people on emails, but I will always reply eventually. Right, let me have a little slurp of limonata. Okay, struggled for about 6 months when nobody could find a starting issue on my car. Ended up being a crank sensor. I would have started off with a crank sensor or fuel pressure regulator. But, that's me. Right. Ooh, Robbie, hi. Recommended oil change interval on a tuned EJ. Do you recommend disconnecting of the crank sensor to turn over the engine the first couple of times? Yeah, I do. Oil change, it depends what the car's been used for. If you're just cruising around, then, 4,000, 6,000 should be alright if you're on good oil. If you taking it on a track day and the oil's got sort of 110, 120 degrees, then probably a good idea to drop it and give it an oil change. As far as disconnecting the crank sensor, if it's kind of one of those superstitious things. I always do it, but does it need it? I always pre-fill the oil filter. Certainly on a completely fresh build where there isn't oil through most of the galleries, then yes, definitely disconnect it. But I could bet your bottom dollar if you took your car into Subaru for them to do an oil change, they wouldn't do it. I'd probably bet good money that they wouldn't even pre-fill the oil filter, they'd just start it up. But yeah, to answer your question, yes, disconnect, pre-fill the oil filter until at least the engine oil pressure lights go off. I'll come back to that one. Maximum power output 2017 Forester XT. Is that a direct injection FA20 engine? Because it varies depending on the market of the car. If it isn't and it's an EJ, then you're probably into the 350 region for a 2.5 engine before it starts to really become unreliable. Yeah, that's probably where I would say 350, and you should be okay from a reliability point of view. But anything you're doing nudging the power up is ultimately squeezing the safety margin. So if you can't afford for things to go wrong, then probably wouldn't recommend pushing power. Yeah, Subaru first, wife second. My first wife said either the car goes or me. Yeah, I had that car for many years afterwards. Obviously lost all the money, but there we go. Long story. you got the same power on pump and meth, but you got more torque. Yeah, well, you got 2.5, so you're going to get more torque. What can you do to make mine even faster? Nitrous. You know, if you want to play, then nitrous is the ultimate. And certainly for what you boys do up there, you know, it's epic fun. Until things go badly wrong, but you know, you're pushing it on the 2.5. You know, I know that it's a built engine, but it is a 2.5, and you know, mid fives or approaching 600 horsepower. I would hate to say that I wouldn't recommend it personally. Make the car lighter. That's a good thing to do. Right, carry on the oil topic. What do you recommend? 10, 40, 50, 60? I run 1060. I put 1060 in the engines that I build. And it's, you know, Subaru engines aren't a new design. I think oil companies or oil suppliers that tell you that you should be running 530, it makes me shudder. Personally, it makes them sound rattly and horrible, and I think it's just too thin an oil for quite an old design of engine. I run liquid moly, Racetech 1060, and have not had an issue with that at all. Right, how can you tell if your MAF scaling is covering up incorrectly scaled injectors or latencies with aftermarket intake and injectors? Right, ultimately, it's the results that matter. It doesn't matter two iotas as to what the actual values that you put in various fields. If the results are working, i.e. the air fuel ratio is what you're after, then you know it doesn't matter. There's many times where the MAF curve, you know, to get around 300 grams per second limits on a 16-bit ECU, you have to scale that back and then scale the injector sizing. So the values don't relate to what the reality is. But if the results are giving you the results, or if the figures that you got in there are giving you the right results, then great. That's ultimately what it's all about. If you're getting issues with fuel corrections or air fuel ratio at any point, then you know to really go back on it and go into real detail and make sure everything is absolutely perfect and the latencies and the scaling is absolutely perfect. You know, the way to do that is go back to stock setup, stock injector, stock intake pipe, stock intercooler, and change one thing, scale for that change. Change another thing, scale for that change. But that's quite time consuming. Ultimately it doesn't matter. You know, don't sweat on the absolute details. You know, I say this to some of the guys in the academy where they're sort of going down rabbit holes, sort of looking at things that they don't really need to be looking at. You can waste so many days and weeks and months of tuning and end up going full circle and coming back round to where you were in the beginning. You know, things like fuel corrections and fuel learning. You know, fuel learning, if it's within 2 or 3%, fine. You know, let the ECU do what it's doing. Fuel corrections, again, if it's within 5%, perfect, great. It's going to change day to day anyway. And yeah, MAF scalings. If you've got an issue, then you know, data log it and try and work out how to solve it. But you're only going to be guessing if you've got too many variables in there. You do need NOS, but your engine will not thank you for it, Kyle, I'm afraid. Put a 2.35 in there and then talk to me about putting nitrous in. Yeah, 530 is coloured water. You do an oil change on a car with 530 in, and it just runs out like water. You know, I changed like the Forester SH5 that I've got. Changed the oil on that because it's just a daily driver. I changed that at 6,000 miles, and the oil with the liquid moly Racetech 1060 comes out. It's still lovely. It's still golden. It's a nice oil. It's not coming out like a piece. Most reliable block EJ22 or a billet EJ25. Spec C heads 2.1235. Yeah, 235. 235 is the ultimate engine in my opinion. If you can get hold of an EJ22 block, they are not cheap. They're not easy to come by. And yeah, they're a beautiful engine. You know, they'll hold 750 horsepower in standard form, and you've got the mixture of capacity for torque and revability, and you know, it's the perfect shape engine, sort of bore versus stroke. You know, they are wonderful engines. The EJ25 billet blocks again are amazing, but you huge money, and the closed deck conversions on the 2.5, I personally have no belief that they do anything other than make it look pretty. They support the top of the block, but the liners break further down. They're only 5mm thick, the liners on the 2.5, which is not enough if you're pushing a good amount of power. Hold on a minute. Right, pond flip. Forester STI started struggling to make boost. Felt heavy and lurchy. Check the hoses. The one going from the T to the sensor. If that line is leaking, would this cause this problem? I think you're meaning from the T to the boost solenoid. If that line is leaking, then it's gonna overboost, I would say, unless I'm thinking of a different T-piece, but that's the only other T-piece is on the evap solenoid at the front. I can't remember whether the Forester STI has got that. I don't think it has. Struggling to make boost, I'd say there's something else going on. Personally, if that line that I think you're talking about has cracked or perished, that's going to make it overboost. Right, the fuel correction. If you're sitting at idle, will gradually creep up because of engine bay temperature, so it will make it run slightly leaner. So if you're sitting there at idle, particularly in a hot country, it will eventually learn to add more fuel just because it's getting bloody hot under there. You know, I've tuned in hot countries and you regularly see sort of 70 degrees under bonnet temperatures, which is really pretty warm. Generally speaking, if you've just come to idle and it's sat there for a minute, then within 5% either way is fine. If you get in areas of your MAF region, so it's broken up into 4 regions, so if you get in areas of that are taking out 12 degrees, then I'd say that there's either an issue with the MAF curve, or the MAF sensor, or an air leak, or you know, some part of the tune that's just not quite right. if it's carrying minus 12 degrees on boost, then I'd say there's a big issue with a map or an air leak, and it's something you want to solve, because taking 12 degrees out on the fueling could be taking it from safe to very unsafe. EJ25, the ultimate engine. It's amazing. Which phase of EJ22 for a 235 build? You want the closed deck EJ22, not the open deck that they put in some of the normally aspirated legacies, but the closed deck that was fitted to the 22B and some of the phase 1 legacy twin turbos. So obviously there isn't many cars it was fitted to, hence why they're rare and bloody expensive. Could it be collapsing under the vacuum if not leaking? There's no vacuum on that, it's only pressure, so it's not gonna collapse. RJ's been notified. Yeah, it's your money, Carl. Yeah, it's your money. But yeah, 235 is what you need. Right, almost towards the end. So, last few questions, guys. Right, would a front mount intercooler have an effect on a USDM 2.5 STI tune? Yes, it would. The effect that it has isn't really from the intercooler itself, but it's the fact that you have to change the induction setup. So the standard airbox would have to go, and you'd be replacing that with an induction kit. So the MAF housing would be slightly different, and it only needs to be very slightly different for it to materially alter the amount of airflow that it's thinking is going into the engine. Like if that housing is maybe 1 mil bigger, then that's going to have like a massive impact on the air-fuel ratio. So it'll think that there's less air going in than there is, and therefore it's going to add less fuel than it ought to have. This is how manufacturers of the induction kits claim like 10 horsepower improvement, just because it randomly leans out the mixture. Whether it's safe or not, it leans it out, and it might make that horsepower briefly, and then start messing around or blowing up or whatever. Yes, so the front mount will change it, but mainly because of the induction kit. Yes, yeah, EJ22T, very rare, and yeah, very sought after. Needs a bit of machining for the 2.5 crank, and if you're doing a proper EJ22 build into a 2.35, you'd want to block up the oil squirters at the bottom of the block, and also probably fit 14mm head studs. But those things, it's going to take 700-800 horsepower. Generally, they break at about 750. I know because I've broken 2 of them. But at that point, it's just the liners that split, and then set of top hat sleeves in there, and it's good to go. Right. I think I've answered all the questions. If I haven't, I apologise. If there's any questions that you think of after I've switched off, then pop it in the comments below, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. But yeah, last question, and then I'll switch off. Right. Okay, I think there's a completely different issue. Like, drives fine off boost, but when you start to hit boost, it lurches and only makes half a bar. So it's put itself into limp mode because it's either heard detonation, or because there's something mechanically wrong. Advanced mod suppliers dropped down. It's put it onto a different fuel map, which would be much richer. It would take out huge chunks of ignition timing, which will do all kinds of weird stuff, make it feel flat as a fart and basically ruin it from a driving point of view. But, investigate, data log what's going on in the ECU, what the ECU's seeing. If it's asking for more boost, but the car's only giving it half a bar, then, there's something mechanical going on. If it's only asking for half a bar of boost and, it's doing what it's asked, then, there's different issues that it could be. Ooh, right, not the last question. This one's the last question, sorry. Think my rod snapped in the bottom end of my EJ20. Is it salvageable? Is it worth putting forged rods and crank, or is it worth getting a new pre-built bottom end from places like ICP? The mess that is created when a rod snaps really is horrific, and the damage inside that block will be awful. There'll be bits everywhere. It is not worth doing anything with. If the rod has snapped, it's probably tried to come out the top of the block. It is probably not even worth stripping it down because it's just going to be a pile of bits inside there. The new EJ207 short block assemblies from the likes of ICP, etc., are brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. So I would go down that route rather than putting forged rods into a block that has been destroyed. Okay, right. Thank you very much, and I will see you next week. Cool.